See, it's a morning requirement to be able to, like, you got to be just dancing along the thing. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to American Scouser's Morning Coffee. We're bobbing heads and ready to go this morning with Mateusz. Mateusz, what's happening, man?
Not much, not much. You got to wake yourself up, so you're gonna listen to music. I had this terrible nightmare that we lost to Arsenal, and then Trent and Diaz were hurt, and they're out for a while. I don't know. So I think I need something to really wake me up. So I'm glad that was just some weird nightmare that I slept through, and I'm good to go.
I'll let the commentators and listeners clue you in on what's happening in real life. Yeah, I mean,
That was a nightmare.
what a weekend, what a Sunday. I even nominated to, my beards. I was Alan is here good this morning. Good morning, Alan. I even nominated my beard. I was going to shave the whole thing off if all three games I was following won. And yeah, we started on the first one with Liverpool now winning that game, and a lot to talk about. And I'm sure, like with the boys, Bickler and Galley tonight, we'll get into it, a lot of it. But what do you make of it? What do you make? I mean, obviously, the biggest talking point I've seen about the game is the refereeing, and
Sure.
nobody's happy with it. Not that it was great, but I just have it. I personally have a tough time putting that on the refereeing overall. Where are you at with it?
Yeah, it's. I feel we always try to find the easiest scapegoat because it's a lot easier to blame the referee than it is to blame the players that we love. And I think part of it, as long as there's consistency across the league, because it's not just a one-off yesterday. It's just a classic case of there needs to be more of an understanding of what certain rules are, right? Because in the United game against Everton, we had
Kelly blames me. What the hell? Am I this is the dude? I thought the gambling the beard was it's high stakes. I thought, but well, guess not.
Good thing you're not
Hence
a
it's still here.
actual betting man because you'd be losing a lot of money if you kept playing these parlays.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, okay, right, yeah. The
I
beard.
lost two decent parlays yesterday with only one of them going wrong in like a 5-6 game parlay. So yeah, don't say parlay to me for at least 48 hours if you can.
Parlay.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead. We were talking about the United
yeah,
game.
in the United game, Rashford had a goal ruled off for a handball that, I mean, I guess you can half the time it gets called, half the time it doesn't, right? But it shouldn't be half and half. It should be, it's either called or it isn't called. And I know it's hard to have the same people be on VAR for all the games because it's impossible to have one person or a group of people sit there and see every single game, especially when you have 4 or 5 games going at the same time. But apart from that, I think while I like Klopp trying to find this new formation, I don't think Thiago and Henderson are good enough defensively for a back two. And I think that was partly what was happening yesterday is that there just wasn't enough cover or enough good enough cover from them. And I think especially if Thiago clears the ball before there's a chance for that little scruffle in the box, then there's no point, there's no argument for the penalty because if he just booted away, instead he was trying to be a little too cute in the box, lose it in the box, and then 20 seconds, 10 seconds later, they've got a penalty out of it. So sometimes, and I know Thiago likes to do that, and he just maybe doesn't have the mindset of just in the box, just boot it, man. Sometimes you just got to go back to 7-year-olds just booting it away, be safe. And I think they kind of what Arsenal did really well was that they did what Man United did against us, and just the fast breaks. Just be able to counter really quickly, and I think that's a strength of theirs that they were able to exploit. So I don't want to sit here and criticize the ref because it's tired. Not that it's not tired to be upset and criticize this team for the lack of performances, but I think it's much. There's much more to talk about than just the refereeing.
Yeah, especially with the handballs, it feels like they've gone. I mean, when they changed the wording, the gray area got bigger, which should be the opposite goal of changing the wording because it was like in an unnatural position. Okay, unnatural position, we're going with that. Then they added some additional wording like unnatural position in terms of your movement, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, now what is unnatural? Because maybe I run like this and you run like that. It's just, we go back to that.
Sterling runs like this,
Yeah, it just doesn't, I don't know, like that first one especially. And would it have changed the game? Because we did tie it. And, obviously it went back to where it was. So But the penalty, I mean, we discussed it a lot, argued over a lot on Discord as well while we were watching the game together. And I thought it was a penalty. And, what I try to do in all these situations is imagine the situation reversed. If it was of Jesus, it was Mo, or on the back, if it was, Van Dijk's handball instead of Gabriel's, and try to put it's hard, but try to think, what would the call be, or what would I feel like? And I thought with the handball, if we gave up a penalty ourselves, I would have said that's harsh, but it is what it is. Your hand is out there, man, is what I probably would have. So if we were watching it as VAR, like why are VAR watching it, we would probably say, man, it's away from the body. And I think we would have accepted it. But on the other side, I know I would have wanted a penalty if it was Mo, because Thiago is not getting the ball at all, and he's getting nothing but Jesus, and Jesus touches the ball. If Jesus doesn't get the ball, that's one thing, but he touches the ball to maybe try to be able to control it, and maybe just going to bring it down and slam it, and probably not, because it was crowded in there, but that's not how it works. We don't do it and the intent doesn't matter. In both cases, the intent doesn't matter. But yeah, I know what you mean in terms of the consistency, though, especially with the handballs, because it's like, I think a lot of the fans are complaining based on that, because we've seen, the word that the phrase everybody uses is we've seen them given.
Right.
And I think, like you're saying, that's the problem. But I mean, how do we even combat that apart from making the wording so black and white that it's just like you look at it, then you immediately know that there's almost like no gray area.
And that's the tough part, right? Is just, how do we fix that? I think suggestions have been to have refs from outside of England, outside of possible any sort of, I mean, I don't want to call it bias, but if you grow up in England, chances are, if you're a supporter of a club for a long time, and even if you become a referee, you might still have some of those inklings in the back of your mind of, I like this team more than this other team. But I mean, that's kind of a cheap shot at refs, because I don't really truly believe that. I'm just trying to think of reasons why they're bad, other than just maybe the league not seriously taking the level of officiating, kind of just being comfortable with who they have and not really trying to better that aspect of the game. Because I think as a league, you should always be trying to get better in every area. And if that means the refereeing, that also means refereeing, right? So maybe trying to look into having refs from different parts of the world come from different leagues. I don't know. It's tough, because there's not an easy answer. I feel like we've had a similar conversation recently where there's no, like, the racism thing, right? It's just, I'm not going to compare those two. Please, whoever's watching this, bad refereeing and racism are not hand in hand. Those are two separate things. One is much worse than the other. So I'm just saying that some things it's harder to find the solution for right away.
And the funny thing is, like you mentioned that about bringing referees from outside, because it's almost becomes, be careful what you wish for too. Because last week, Fenerbahce's Europa game was ref by Chris Kavanagh, and I remember my brother saying, we should bring this guy. Apart from some like weird things in the game, his linesmen were more than him. I mean, he refed a good game. He kept the game going. The game, really, like, there was a flow to the game and stuff like that. And afterwards, like, in our podcast, my brother was like, hey, like, we should bring a guy like this and get rid of our refs. So I think everybody, it's almost like we all want what the other side has. It looks good from this side. And then the moment they come over, and perhaps I think one of the things that I was thinking for that is, which is why I find shocking that Premier League refs don't get more international games. I think Premier League is one of the toughest because it's a lot faster. So it's kind of like obviously more difficult to ref, as opposed to when they go to a slower competition, it's a lot easier for them. It's almost like, playing Madden and all Madden and then switching to pro, like suddenly you have all the time in the world kind of a deal. So Trevor says bad players get let go, bad refs stay. That's a lot of people's issue with it. And I think that's the thing. But at the same time, there's, with the players, there's another guy around the corner, not as much with refs. And I know I can understand why they wouldn't want an inexperienced guy up there. But I think one thing about bringing refs in, like you're saying, one thing that I can see it eliminate is that bias. Because you're right. I mean, even if you might not be a hardcore fan of a team, you probably dislike more another. I mean, we have certain dislikes for clubs that, hey, at times you can't even explain why you hate this team much more than
We were told
the
to,
other
like
team.
everyone else did,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things where you might like dislike another team more, and I mean, these guys are human. It has to be in their back of the head somewhere. Um, Looking at the weekend scores, like I said, we'll probably dissect the hell out of this game tonight.
Yeah.
And I'm getting the sense that we were talking about it this morning amongst ourselves and on the Discord channel that, yeah, not a lot of people might agree because all the outrage I see, aside from like the FSG out people coming out of the caves and getting the sunshine, and it's been mostly like about the refs and like Michael Oliver and stuff. And honestly, like when I saw Michael Oliver start the game, I was like, okay, good, we got Michael Oliver. And I mean, throughout the game, I mean, apart from those two incidents, what did you think about the refereeing overall? Because I think the thing overall was most of the calls were going like the home team's way.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's part of it too, right? It's just sometimes we have to understand that more often than not, the home team is going to get away with a couple extra calls because that's just kind of how it goes. When you have the crowd, the noisiness from the crowd, the levels of the crowds that each Premier League game has, you're going to have moments where the ref, just based off just pure dissonance alone from fans, is going to make the call because there's nothing else that he can really do at that point. So there were a couple more calls that went Arsenal's way, but it's not like we helped ourselves. If Darwin Nunez could stay on side for 80 minutes of the match, then maybe things could have gone better too. Like I feel like there's certain elements that we have to look past when it comes to because yes, it sucks to lose basically off of one call that a ref made, the penalty that VAR made. But at the same time, we didn't do ourselves any favors with the rest of the game, and that's what it comes down to. It's just I think there are some matches where we can be really upset with the refereeing. I don't think yesterday is one where the level of upset that we have should outweigh the level of upset we have with the players themselves.
I think so. I think, we don't want to get as mad as the player or, I think the fan base always picks a couple of players to mad at, like nobody has issue maybe getting mad at Trent, but some people have an issue getting mad at Van Dijk. Nobody has an issue getting mad at Thiago. Everybody gets mad at Hendo. Yeah. I mean, I think like sometimes, as fan bases, and this is for every club really. I mean, there are certain players that can get away with murder. And there are certain players that will not get away with like one small error, even if they were like great the rest of the game. So, and I mean, there were some good things to see. I honestly felt, and looks like, I mean, obviously, if Diaz is out, we will see a lot more of Nunez up there, probably pushing Jota to the left. Even if we do a 4-3-3, I mean, you might see Bobby in the middle occasionally, but I feel. And you can't deny Bobby's form. I thought that was like a very well taken goal as well, and I thought he did well throughout the game. But with Nunez, I mean, what is your take on that? I actually felt as I was watching, especially in the second half, that I got the same feeling earlier in the preseason with City, where Haaland was making these ridiculous runs. And people would like pull the ball back and go the other way. And I'm like, man, they're not going to be able to use this guy. They're wasting it. Somehow they changed that overall and they started looking up to see those runs. I mean, and you're not going to get the ball every time you make a run. Right. But sometimes you'll take defenders with you and it opens up space. I felt like Nunez was making a ton of those good runs yesterday and it was not being taken advantage of. And at times, I think it was taken advantage too late. I mean, some of the offsides are, like, yeah, man, watch the line. But some of them are the ball being released too late.
Too late.
It's a matter of like adjustment, you think, or
yeah. And I think part of it too is, especially with him playing with Jota. Jota has only played. This is his second game with him, second or third game, probably, I believe. Yeah. So because Jota's been hurt, and so similarly to the Haaland situation, is the players have to get used to how these players make their runs because they haven't played with that specific player, and so they need to get used to how he plays. And so there were a couple moments where I think, yes, he could have stayed on if the ball was played earlier. And I think one of them in particular is in the second half. I think it was roughly in the 70 or before Jota came off, when Nunez was on his left side and Jota tried to play a ball across the field to, I don't know who, but and it's
he
just,
knew it. Nobody knew.
yeah, it was like Megan said in our Discord, it's like he was playing FIFA and he knew if he just held the cross button, shot it across the field, because you could see the whole field because you got the view from the bird's eye up above, that you know where you're going. But he did not know where he was going. So I think that was one of those. Sometimes I feel like they make a more difficult decision that needs to be done. Sometimes all you need to do is just roll the ball in front of the guy that's running in front of you, rather than trying to be cute with it. And I think that's something that they've struggled with, that we've talked about, or you guys have talked about, at least on the podcast throughout the years, is just, especially in and around the box, just don't get too cute with it. Just boot it. Just get it on goal. You don't make an extra 3-4 passes that don't necessarily need to be made. Sometimes you just gotta just boot it in goal. So I think once these players play more often with each other, we could see that change a little bit. It's just it's tough to have that in the middle of the season, because I know we always talk about the Klopp preseason. I know Darwin was part of the preseason, but he wasn't part of the preseason with Jota, right? I mean, it's one of those things where those two players together, they haven't really played together, and so now they're gonna, with Diaz being out, it's almost like they're gonna have to find a new way to play them together, and it might take a couple more games now to get used to it. So it's tough.
It's tough. It's not going to be. I mean, I was not optimistic, but I was, well, maybe semi-optimistic that this could be a huge October, going into it. But looks like this is going to be a painful October more than anything else. Speaking of painful, I mean, one of the bigger headlines was, I mean, yesterday this came out right after the game, that FA is reviewing the confrontation that what's rumored to be where Henderson is involved, and not a lot of specifics, so I don't want to like even continue spreading rumors, but I've heard, like said something racist and something homophobic. It just seems out of character for a guy we know, and a player I really like more so than his off-field stuff, than maybe perhaps even like on-field stuff as a person. What do you make of that story? Or is it just, I mean, part of me says if it was that big, it would come out by now. But at the same time, just the fact that they're looking into it is kind of odd.
Yeah, and similarly to you, I don't feel like there's much to say, unfortunately, on it until we get more information, because this is how these rumors get started and how news gets spread, misinformation gets spread. Is just one person says one thing, and then we talk about this, and then we just, oh yeah, that sounds good, we talk about that, and then we say that, and the next person says that, and all of a sudden everyone's talking about this, and it comes out that it's not even true. So I don't think there's much to say on it, but other than the fact that the only things that I've heard so far is that it doesn't involve Henderson. And like you said, based off his off-field things, it just doesn't seem to make sense. But at the same time, Henderson has been, I mean, he'd rather complain and whine this year than play football sometimes. So I feel like it's one of those things, or maybe he was just at a breaking point of such frustration. Maybe he did say something out of character. I don't know. But I feel like maybe it would help if he needed a couple games off, right? I mean, I feel like at this point, as much as Hendo is adored, and he's been one of my favorites at the club over the last decade, it's just, I don't know if he's getting to the point of Milner, where it's just like, do we want to see him start these matches? Do we want him to play? It's hard to watch sometimes, and I feel like I hope that there wasn't something that he said that could also stain his reputation or stain his who he is, because he's done some wonderful things, and I hope that it's nothing that serious.
Yeah, I mean, the dude has done so much off the field too, and like fundraisers and awareness stuff, and that's why it's kind of like shocking. I mean, as someone who, I admit, like becomes a different person on the field, when you get mad, like you say shit, but you don't say, like, you don't become racist out of anger. Like, you might say stuff that you'll be like, holy shit, that was a little over the top, probably.
Yeah.
But like when you look back on it afterwards, but you don't like suddenly become racist and start saying racist stuff. You just, maybe like you'll insult or whatever. But there have been times where I've said, holy shit, I probably should have toned that down. But
Yeah.
it's never. I mean, if you're not homophobic, you don't say that stuff. If you're not racist, you don't say that.
Right.
So suddenly it doesn't work itself into your vocabulary. You might just go over the top and lose your shit and go ape shit. But and you could tell there were some words exchanged there, but it's just like you could not tell. Obviously, nobody knows it, and just the fact that there is nothing out yet feels like, or is it kind of because it's Henderson, it's being protected a lot more by FA, just because he has been more of those high profile guys for the national team. And in terms of, like I say, this off the field stuff that the Premier League initiates and stuff like that, so it might be being kept quiet a lot more because of that. But I agree with you. I just don't want that tainted, because I feel like he's been like he's been a guy that I think is like an exemplary, like a football player, aside from the stuff on the field. I mean, I liked what he's done on the field too. I know what you're saying, though. It has been more painful to watch as we go, but so I'm sure like we'll find out more about that in the next couple I was expecting to see a couple more headlines this morning, but nothing yet. Same old. And Whipper retires due to a heart condition. I always am shocked. I mean, at least they caught this early. I mean, that's the good thing, because I'm always shocked where like stuff happens to players who go through ridiculous checkups and like pops up. So I'm glad they kind of caught this and stopped it early. I feel like soccer, as advanced and as much money is involved, does a terrible job of taking care of his players, especially with the concussion stuff and all that. But even this stuff, so I was almost like, I mean, it's like sad to see a player having to retire because of that, but at the same time, you're happy that they caught it and it didn't happen due to something on the field.
Yeah, and I think going back to your comment, like yesterday when we saw Jesus get knocked out by that elbow, I mean there's a good reason, or there's a good argument for not having him come back into the game. If you have someone take a shot like that fall face first in the ground, where's the protocol for that? And I know players are going to want to play, and we've seen similar things in NFL recently. I know this is a soccer podcast, but we've seen things in the NFL where we've had guys get a concussion or not get a concussion and then play 4 days later, and then their body just locks up in the middle of the field in front of everyone. Like, it's just, I feel like even though there's so much money in the sport, at the end of the day, like, it's just a bunch of rich people owning clubs and kind of sending these guys out as machines, like kind of cogs in a machine, right? So like, it sucks to look at it that way, but I feel like we, like you said, it's good that it was caught and didn't happen during a game or anything, but it's just it is a little odd that you can go through, especially at 24. There had to have been at least, now let's say professionally, 6 seasons of full checkups, and to not be able to see something like that in 6 seasons, and I don't know, maybe they're not looking for the right thing, because I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I know how to diagnose a heart condition. So
I'm all about that.
Yeah, and yeah, tell me how you do it, because given they said it's a hereditary heart condition, so maybe it took someone from his family to get sick before they looked at a specific thing, and maybe that's why it went unnoticed for those years. But it's tough to think about. I mean, I think about 24, all those years ago, and not being able to do.
How many years ago would it be for the Polish prince? How old are you now?
I'm turning 30 next month. So
damn, dude.
Years ago.
Yeah, once you turn 30, I hate to say it. Nah, it's the same.
Yeah. I hope Brighton take care of him during this and after this. I know he's probably made a good amount of money up until this point. Even a Premier Premier League player at clubs like Norwich and Bournemouth. And when Norwich was here, they still make decent money. It's just a matter of, how, if he was able to save some of that, or because you don't think, 20, 22, 23, 24-year-old kid, they're like, I'm going to play for another 6, 7, 8 years. I'm going to make all this money. I don't need to save any of it. That's fine. So just hope that it's one of those things where he gets taken care of, similarly to how some clubs have taken care of some of the academy players that they've let go, after they haven't been good enough to advance to the pro side or to the senior side.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like, the dude is 24. He's probably like, oh, I got at least like another 7, 8 years. Then I'll probably go to, another lower league, play a couple of years there, like make my money, or maybe go to Major League Soccer at the end. I'll finish here. I mean, if you're like making a plan, you would think, it's like I say, when I saw the news, my initial reaction was like, oh man, that sucks for the dude. But at the same time, I was like, well, I'm glad they caught it early rather than later. Alan says Leeds was forced to evacuate plane after players smelled burning rubber on arrival at Leeds Bradford Airport. Confirmation all on board left the flight safely. That could just be somebody having a rough breakfast, or like a burrito or something too. But okay, so let's take a look at the weekend scores here. It wouldn't be a morning in honor of Maka if we didn't bash Brendan Rodgers. But I mean, holy cow, man! I mean, talking about that was one of those where I was like, that's one of my bigger parlays. I had Bournemouth, and I was like, I saw the game as 1-0. I'm like, well, there goes that parlay early. Thanks to freaking like Bournemouth. I figured like they would do something at home kind of deal. And then somebody made fun of like Rodgers. I'm like, no, you don't freaking tell me. And I look at the score and he's gone. I mean, aside from that comeback, I thought that was like a natural score going into the weekend, to be honest. Anything that shocks you? I mean, you look at the scores and it felt like business as usual. Brighton Tottenham could have gone either way, so that was like a fun game to watch.
Yeah,
aside from that, anything interesting?
No, I mean, I think Tottenham got a great result there against Brighton. I'm a little surprised at how much Newcastle just dismantled Brentford, because Brentford has shown good sparks throughout the year, but just to completely capitulate against Newcastle, that was a little bit surprising. That's where, but other than that, I think everything else was par of the course, kind of what we expected to see. And if Brendan Rodgers still has a job by the end of next week, then then good for him. So,
what was the game they played? And I watched it, and they were like, "Oh, see, these guys still play for Brendan and stuff like that." Oh,
was it
the
Forest
game
last week? Yeah.
Game. Yeah,
it's
like the commentators are like, these guys are still playing hard for Rodgers and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, but only for like 80 minutes.
These guys are playing Forest and they like to score. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, not that we're bashing Brendan Rodgers, but it probably was not good. Alamola says it was probably the tires, but no, I'm still going with the burritos. Yes, Steve Bruce is available. Queen's Park Rangers has canned them as well. That was one of like the headlines I saw, but I was like, Steve Bruce, he'll pop up somewhere else and he'll be canned from somewhere else.
Hasn't QPR been playing? They're in third. Why did they?
Is it not QPR? Did I not think he was in QPR? Now you got me confused. Oh, West Bromwich. I'm sorry, West Bromwich.
Okay, yeah, I was like, wait a minute.
It was 3 in the church. It was the other one.
Yeah, because West Brom's in the relegation zone of the AFL.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Yeah, Trevor says they're playing for their manager against the rock bottom worst defense. Gonna pad the stats for a move away. And I think, especially like Madison and stuff like that, I almost feel like some of those guys have, completed their mission, if you will, at that club, and they want to go somewhere else.
They're playing so well because they want other clubs. They're literally going, save me, take me from this burning ship. Look at what I can do still. Granted, it's Forest again. It's Forest, but these guys, they want to go elsewhere, I feel, at this point.
Rodgers is probably trying to play Forest every week to save his gig, but the amount of points they have given from having leads is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and and then we with Forest too. I mean, they gave Steve Cooper a 4-year extension after that 4-0 loss. It's like they gave him a year extra for every goal that they gave up that game.
Yeah, right. The dude is probably like, oh man, like I wish they scored a couple more. Damn, Madison shouldn't have missed that.
I'd be here till 2027.
Well, Mitzish, it's time for that second cup of Joe. I'm sure it's going to be one heck of a podcast tonight with Gally and Bickler. Will be live at 8 o'clock Central. And right afterwards, actually, we're going to be recording the Premier League show as well. But I think the major part is going to be the parts with probably like the refereeing and stuff like that. I want to get the guys' takes on like the different things. And
I will say that, because it just kind of was coming up to my head, the penalty that Sadio Mane won, I can't remember who it was against, but it was nearly a 50-50 ball that he just was able to get around to, and then someone clipped the back of his heel and he went down. This was last year, 2 years ago.
Tottenham. Yes. The player.
Yeah, and so in thinking about that Thiago and Jesus situation compared to that, because a lot of people are trying to compare, well, it's not so much, it's a 50-50 ball, so what is he supposed to do? We were awarded that pen that you could say that Mane just barely beat Aurier out to that ball, and that's when Aurier clipped them, and that's, so it's just like, I don't know, I hate to go back to that point, but I feel like it doesn't matter. Don't put yourself in that position in the first place, and that's fine.
And that was my thing, like, what should Thiago do? Like, what is he supposed to do? You're supposed to be faster. You're supposed to be the first one to the ball. I mean, that's basically, you got to position yourself better. You got to be first to the ball. Mane actually had a record of doing that. I think, was it Drinkwater or who was it? He did the same thing in the Leicester game too. Right before they were clearing it or putting it away, he kind of like would be able to, because he was so agile and fast, put his foot in there,
right?
So that like he would get the contact and it would be a penalty. Because once you make that contact, you're stopping the guy from doing whatever the heck he's trying to do. It's a penalty. I mean, I want to see what the guys will say, but I don't know. To me, it was a clear penalty. I know a lot of people don't think like me, but I really feel that's kind of like our bias. We're looking at it with like Liverpool glasses, because if it was happening to Mo, he's trying to bring the ball down. He was like, how was he supposed to shoot? He got kicked.
We would be irate.
Exactly. Yeah. So, well, Mitsush, thanks a lot for joining us this Monday. We missed you last Monday because,
sorry. I was,
why?
I was, as one could say, out of order.
And that's why I broke the glass. Trevor jumped on, thankfully. Trevor will be with me tomorrow morning. Like I said, the gang will be here tonight, and we'll see you guys then. Take care, everybody. Have a great Monday.